Drinking alcohol, smoking, and drug use are harmful to health.
The air inside was still, not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of something holding its breath. Daniel stood just inside the threshold of the old house, his boots leaving faint prints in the dust that coated the foyer's warped hardwood floor. The door behind him had creaked shut with a finality that made his skin prickle, as though the house itself had decided he wasn't leaving anytime soon. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, the weight of his flashlight, water bottle, and notebook grounding him against the oppressive silence. He hadn't meant to come here. Not exactly. Ash Lane was a name he'd overheard in a diner 2 towns over, a muttered warning between locals who'd clammed up when they noticed him listening. "Stay clear of that place," one had said, a grizzled man with a face like worn leather. "Ain't right." Daniel, a freelance journalist, chasing stories of forgotten places, had felt a familiar spark of curiosity. Abandoned houses were his bread and butter, each one a puzzle of history and decay, a chance to piece together lives left behind. But this one, this house on Ash Lane, felt different even before he stepped inside. The dirt road leading to it had been slick with mud, though the sky was cloudless, and the trees flanking the path seemed to lean inward, their branches clawing at the air. The foyer was dim, lit only by slivers of gray light filtering through boarded-up windows. Furniture loomed under sheets, their shapes distorted into ghostly silhouettes. A chair with too many legs, a table that seemed to sag under an invisible weight. Daniel ran his hand over one of the sheets, and the dust clung to his fingers, damp and gritty, as though the house was sweating. He wiped his hand on his jeans, frowning. The floorboards groaned under his steps, but the sound was muffled, swallowed by the thick air, as if the wood was afraid to draw attention to itself. The first strange thing he noticed was the smell. Not rot, not mildew, but something metallic, faint yet sharp, like blood diluted with rainwater. It hung in the air, elusive, curling into his nostrils only when he inhaled deeply. He paused, sniffing, trying to place it. The smell wasn't constant. It drifted, as though carried by a breeze he couldn't feel. He shook his head, chalking it up to old pipes or rusted fixtures, and moved deeper into the house. Room after room, the house was the same. Covered furniture, warped wallpaper peeling in slow, deliberate curls, and cold patches of air that seemed to cling to his legs as he walked. The parlor was a mausoleum of draped shapes, a chandelier overhead, cloaked in cobwebs that swayed slightly, though the air remained still. In the kitchen, a rusted sink held a single cracked teacup, its handle stained a faint reddish brown. Daniel reached for it, then stopped, his fingers hovering. The air grew colder, and the metallic smell sharpened, stinging his throat. He backed away, his heart thudding. He wasn't a stranger to creepy houses. He'd explored dozens, crumbling farmhouses, abandoned manors, even a fire-gutted asylum once. But those places had felt empty, hollowed out by time. This house felt alive, watchful. Every step he took seemed to ripple through it, as though he were disturbing something that had been waiting, patient and silent, for years. Upstairs, the air grew heavier, the smell more pronounced. The staircase creaked under his weight, each step a low moan that seemed to echo longer than it should. At the top, a narrow hallway stretched into shadow, lined with doors that stood ajar, their frames warped as if the house had been trying to close itself off. Daniel's flashlight beam danced across the walls, illuminating wallpaper patterned with faded roses, their petals curling inward like clenched fists. He moved slowly, peering into each room. A nursery with a crib draped in a yellowed sheet, a bedroom with a mirror clouded by age, its surface reflecting nothing but a vague, distorted smear of his face. Each room was empty, yet the air felt crowded, as though invisible eyes tracked his every move. Then he found the door that wouldn't open. It was at the end of the hallway, unremarkable at first glance. Just another warped wooden door, its paint chipped and peeling. No lock, no visible latch, just a tarnished brass knob that felt icy under his palm. He turned it, expecting resistance, but the knob moved freely. The door, however, didn't budge. He pulled harder, leaning his weight into it, and the wood seemed to flex inward, as if something on the other side was pushing back. A faint vibration traveled through his hand, not a sound, but a sensation, like the hum of a distant machine. He froze, his breath catching. He stepped back, his flashlight beam trembling slightly. The air in the hallway thickened, the metallic smell now so sharp it made his eyes water. And then, from beyond the door, he heard it. Breathing. Slow, deliberate, not quite human. A rasp that seemed to come from deep within the house itself, as though the walls were exhaling. He stood rooted, his pulse hammering in his ears. The breathing grew louder, closer, pressing against the door. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own feet, and the sound stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Daniel didn't remember deciding to sit down, but he found himself on the floor, his back against the wall, his flashlight clutched tightly. The hallway was silent again, the door still closed, its surface unmarred. He told himself it was his imagination, the house playing tricks on his tired mind. He'd been driving all day, hadn't eaten since breakfast. Old houses were full of strange noises, settling wood, air trapped in pipes. But the explanation felt hollow, like a lie he was trying to sell himself. He checked his watch, 8:47 p.m. The light outside had faded, leaving the house steeped in darkness. He should leave, he knew that. But the thought of walking back through those rooms, past the covered furniture and the cold patches of air, made his stomach twist. And the door that wouldn't open, seemed to loom larger in his mind, a challenge he couldn't ignore. He stood brushing the dust from his jeans and approached it again. This time, he didn't touch the knob. Instead, he pressed his ear to the wood. Nothing. No breathing, no hum, just silence, so deep it felt like a presence. He lingered there, his breath shallow, waiting for something, anything, to confirm what he'd heard. Minutes passed, and the silence held. Finally, he stepped back, his shoulders sagging. Maybe he was losing it. Maybe the locals' warnings had gotten under his skin. He turned to leave, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark, when a soft thud came from behind the door. He spun around, his heart lurching. The sound was faint, like a book falling flat on a table, but it was unmistakable. He stared at the door, half expecting it to swing open, but it remained closed, its surface as unyielding as before. He backed away, his steps quickening, and descended the stairs, 2 at a time. The house seemed to tighten around him, the air growing colder, the metallic smell now so strong it coated his tongue. He reached the foyer, grabbed the front door's handle, and yanked it open. The night air rushed in, cool and clean, and he stumbled onto the porch, gulping it down like a drowning man. He didn't look back as he hurried down the dirt road, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly. The mud had dried, the path now cracked and hard under his boots, as though it hadn't rained in weeks. He drove away, the house shrinking in his rearview mirror, its silhouette swallowed by the trees. By the time he reached the highway, his hands were shaking, and the metallic smell lingered in his clothes, his hair, his skin. Daniel didn't remember falling asleep. When he woke, sunlight streamed through the windows of his motel room, harsh and unrelenting. He was sprawled on the bed, still in his clothes, his backpack slumped against the wall. The air smelled of damp earth, like a forest after rain, though the motel's carpet was bone dry. He sat up, rubbing his face, and tried to piece together the night before. The house on Ash Lane felt like a dream, its details slippery, but the memory of the breathing behind the door was sharp, etched into his mind like a scar. He showered, hoping to wash away the unease, but the metallic smell clung to him, faint but persistent. He checked his notebook, expecting to find notes from the house, but the pages were blank, the pen still capped in his bag. That was impossible. He always took notes, meticulous to a fault. He flipped through the pages again, his fingers trembling, but there was nothing, just clean, empty lines. He packed up and drove back to Ash Lane, determined to make sense of it. The locals' warnings echoed in his head, but he pushed them aside. He needed answers, needed to see the house in daylight, to prove it was just an old, abandoned building, and not whatever it had felt like. But when he reached the spot where the dirt road should have been, there was nothing. No signpost, no path, just a wall of trees, their branches tangled so tightly they seemed to form a barrier. He got out of his car, scanning the area, but the landscape was unfamiliar, as though the road had never existed. He spent hours driving in circles, checking his map, his GPS, even asking a gas station clerk if she knew Ash Lane. She shook her head, her eyes narrowing. Never heard of it. You sure you got the name right? He wasn't sure of anything anymore. Back in his apartment in the city, Daniel tried to move on. He wrote up other stories, safe ones, about crumbling barns and forgotten mills, but the house on Ash Lane haunted him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd left something behind, or worse, brought something back. The metallic smell followed him, faint but ever present, surfacing in quiet moments. He'd catch it while brewing coffee, or when he opened his closet, as though it had seeped into his belongings. And then there was the breathing. It started a week after he'd returned. He was lying in bed, the city humming faintly outside his window, when he heard it. A slow, rasping inhale, just beyond the edge of the light. He sat up, his heart pounding, and flicked on the lamp. The room was empty, the shadows unchanged, but the sound lingered, faint and fading, like an echo of something that had been there moments before. He told himself it was the pipes, the radiator, the neighbors upstairs. But it happened again the next night, and the night after that, always in the quiet, always just out of sight. He stopped sleeping. He'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound. When it came, it was never loud enough to record, never clear enough to be sure. He started leaving the lights on, but the breathing seemed to adapt, growing softer, closer, as though whatever it was had learned to hide in the glare. Desperate, he dug into the history of Ash Lane. He scoured online forums, old newspapers, even called the county records office, but found nothing. No mention of a house, a road, or even a place called Ash Lane. It was as if the place had been erased or had never existed. He reached out to the locals from the diner, tracking down the grizzled man through a mutual acquaintance. Over the phone, the man's voice was curt, guarded. "Told you to stay away," he said. "Some places don't want to be found." When Daniel pressed for details, the line went dead. He started sketching the house from memory, filling pages with its layout. The foyer, the parlor, the staircase, the hallway with the unyielding door, The act of drawing grounded him, gave him something to hold on to. But the sketches were wrong, somehow. Doors in the wrong places, rooms too large or too small, as though the house refused to be captured. He'd wake to find the pages crumpled, the lines smudged, though he lived alone and kept his apartment locked. One night, 6 months after his visit, he found a new sketch in his notebook. It was the door, the one that wouldn't open, drawn in precise, deliberate lines, as though someone had spent hours perfecting it. The knob was rendered with uncanny detail, every scratch and dent reproduced. Daniel's hands shook as he stared at it. He hadn't drawn it. He was sure of that. The breathing grew louder that night, close enough that he felt the air shift against his neck. He didn't sleep, didn't move, just sat on his couch, clutching his flashlight like a talisman. The metallic smell was overwhelming now, thick and choking, as though the house itself had followed him home. He wondered if he'd ever left Ash Lane at all, if the road, the trees, the city were just a trick, a dream spun by whatever lived behind that door. He considered moving, leaving everything behind, but he knew it wouldn't matter. The house had found him, or he had found it, and now they were bound. He stopped writing stories, stopped leaving his apartment, except for necessities. The breathing was constant now, a rhythm that matched his own, as though something was learning to breathe with him, through him. One night, he woke to find the door to his bedroom closed. He never closed it. He approached it slowly, his hand trembling as he reached for the knob. It was cold, tarnished, like the one in the house. He turned it, and the door opened easily, revealing his dark hallway. But for a moment, just a moment, he swore he saw warped wallpaper, a narrow corridor, and a faint metallic glint in the air. He doesn't go near doors anymore, not if he can help it. He sleeps with the lights on, the windows open, the city's noise a fragile shield against the silence. But the breathing is always there, just beyond the edge of the light, waiting. And sometimes, in the quiet, he feels the house watching, its walls bending inward, holding its breath for him.